All right, so Unit 4, Synthesis, Macbeth. This is going to be a little hard with the mask, but I'm going to gosh darn try my best. All right, so what is a synthesis paper? If you guys have not heard about it before, you guys didn't do it freshman year, it's the big one. A synthesis paper is an essay that's written that combines ideas from different sources. So usually these ideas cover a theme or topic. So what you're going to do is you're going to be reading Macbeth and you're going to be looking for a unified, like you're going to be looking for themes. You're going to be looking for main ideas that Shakespeare introduces with his story in this play, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to backtrack and you're going to connect it with other readings that we have done so far. And we'll review those readings that are options for you as we go on through today. So for example, all of you guys, or most of you guys, should have read Romeo and Juliet, maybe. So you are a little bit of Shakespeare. And then To Kill a Mockingbird is usually a freshman book, maybe, yeah. Okay, so a good one for, a good example for this, because you guys have read both of those, is one could use a synthesis paper to explain how Romeo and Juliet and To Kill a Mockingbird develop themes that address the loss of innocence, right? We have the children that have to go through the trial and all of the drama in To Kill a Mockingbird. And then the two lovers here are, I can't remember what, 14 years old? And they have to deal with all the drama of their parents and kind of rush into this marriage. And then, well, you guys know how that ends, right? So you could write a whole paper kind of connecting those two readings just based on this idea of loss of innocence, right? So you're going to do that, but with your readings from sophomore year. So let's look at the things that we have done so far. And I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat in case anyone wants to help me out, either in the chat or in person. You guys are welcome to help me too. So what have we looked at so far? So in Unit 1, we have and through the units I introduced you guys with like questions, essential questions that you would have to think about as you read. So Unit 1, we looked at how do human beings behave during times of adversity, right? And if you guys remember, adversity is what? You guys remember the definition of that word? Nope. Okay. So adversity is a great challenge, right? A huge undertaking that you have to do that's difficult for you to go through. In this unit, we looked at times of war. We looked at Cranes. You guys remember the gentleman who had to kind of decide between turning his friend in, who's on the opposing side of the war, or doing what he felt was right and letting him go. We had a section from Night. If you do decide to do this, know that it's a section from your literature books. Night is a whole book, so you don't want to get confused there. We have Night, where we have victims of the Holocaust kind of going through that and dealing with being treated in a very less than human way. And then we had All Quiet on the Western Front. We had these very, very young men not being able to live lives as young men, but having to live lives of war, right? If we look at those stories, especially All Quiet on the Western Front, how do human beings react to times of adversity? What would you guys say based on those books? Like, how did the characters in those books respond to adversity? Chad is welcome to help me too. So I have some new students. I don't know if you guys read them or not. In Cranes, what did that gentleman do? Did he turn in his friend? Did he let him go? Do you guys remember? He let him go, right? In times of adversity, in times that were struggle, he chose to kind of dig deep and kind of do the humane thing, the human thing, right? And a lot of the time we see that in All Quiet on the Western Front, that conflict between doing what you feel is morally right in times of difficulty and doing what you feel is your duty or you need to do because of the uniform you wear, right? Okay, if we look at Unit 2, what is the true the true nature of human beings? Are we naturally good? Are we naturally? This is a super interesting thing to read because a lot of you guys were kind of torn between picking a side, right? It's really difficult to label human beings as good or evil. We read The Lottery and we read Lord of the Flies, and we're going to talk particularly about Lord of the Flies and all quiet on the Western Front today because one of our main questions is going to talk about power, authority, and I feel like those two really kind of talk about that. But in the lottery, in Lord of the Flies, we see how humans behave. We see how humans kind of struggle with power, how they struggle with kind of giving in to those around them, right? The pressure of the lottery, how being a part of a group can enable you to do horrible things. And then finally, we've just done the social justice unit, right? So that question there, what is social justice and how do we achieve it? So we looked at readings that I'm going to have you guys do. Focus on if you're going to do this unit, Black men in public spaces, and I am Malala. All right. So these are the works that you're going to be able to go back and connect to Macbeth the best that you can. So I made sure that these were clear. I don't really want you guys trying to connect the literature to any videos that we've watched. This is really about connecting literature together, finding links in reading, because the whole point, the whole reason authors write is to make some kind of human connection with you, is to hit some kind of bigger idea, bigger theme that you can take with you into your life, right? And so that's what we're trying to find, and we're trying to unify those themes throughout our units. All right, so I do have a lot of videos to kind of, help us break apart today. And I think they're really cool videos, except for one. One is kind of more reading tips, but I think it's still interesting. So in this final unit, as I told you, we will be reading Shakespeare's tragedies. We are going to get through Macbeth, but my thing is with Shakespeare, I love Shakespeare. Macbeth is my favorite. I really want you guys to understand this, and I really want you guys to enjoy it to the best of your ability. You'll see in a minute why it's such a fascinating play, and I don't want to rush it. So we are definitely going to get through Macbeth. Julius Caesar is going to kind of be something I'm putting a little tag in. So it may be something that we get to. Hello.
Just checking your phone. Is your phone, does it look rough?
I used it before spring break. It was working fine, but I don't know.
Yeah, you're just good. Okay. That wing's down.
Oh,
okay.
Fun times.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, so Julius Caesar, we're just going to put a little pin in it. We may get to it, we may not. I will let you guys know as we get through the year. And then finally, so we'll be attempting at the very end of this to write a paper that thematically unifies two of the previous readings with something that you have found in Macbeth, okay? So a big thing to recognize as we're going through this is listen to, observe the questions that I ask, observe the quotes that we analyze. If we pause and actually break apart a speech in the play, what's showing up in there, right? What are we talking about? Those are going to be the things that we really want to focus on so that we can kind of connect back to the previous readings that we've read. All right, so before we watch the video, I have a quote here from The Prince by Machiavelli, and it's basically a piece of advice written to all leaders. All leaders at this point are usually leaders based on taking power or on divine right. So his advice to all leaders, very, very summed up, is it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Okay, so I want you guys to take a minute, think about this quote here, and really think about the leaders that you've had in your life, the people that have guided you from, whatever times of struggle that you have had. Maybe a team leader, maybe a teacher, maybe a parent. Do you guys agree with this quote? It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Do you agree with this, and why? So I have someone in the chat already sharing, right? Depends on the situation. So anyone want to kind of share their thoughts on this? Depends on the situation, right? Anyone want to dive deeper? What do you guys think about this quote? Samuel, help me. What do you think about this quote? Do you agree with it?
Not really, because we fear people, we just make them hate you more, and then they just won't be able to like, gain trust when you do need it.
Okay, so it can build a sense of hatred, right? And that depends on the situation, right? If that fear is so strong that it builds into hatred, it builds into loathing, then that can be something that's very dangerous, right? People can fear you, but the minute that you are cut down, right? The minute that you have a level of weakness shown, what happens? What happens if you're completely feared, if you're loathed and hated? There's no love in your leadership. What happens when you need help? What happens when you show weakness? They'll just sit there, they'll watch you struggle, right? Yes? You're alone, you have nobody to support you, right? In an element of power, that can be very dangerous. A big thing, and what we're going to look at in this play is we're going to be looking at a time where power is not given, it's taken, right? Power is fought for. And what can happen if you are only feared and not loved as well, right? He says preferred is both, right? But is when you have that moment of weakness and no one's there by your side. People will come down and your enemies will come and cut you down, right? That's a big danger in this idea of being feared and it turned into loathing, is that your enemies can come get you the moment that you have a weak moment, right? So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna watch the introduction to this play. Now, please understand, as I show you guys stuff today, yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of a spoiler sometimes. But it's Shakespeare. Shakespeare is difficult to understand. We have to read it multiple times in order to understand it. So any context clues, any things that we can get to help us even before we read it is fantastic. Because then we're reading it with new eyes and we can kind of enjoy the language and the style and the characters a lot more when we're not sitting there struggling going, what the heck is going on, right? So let's go ahead and let's watch the introduction.
There's a play so powerful that an old superstition says its name should never even be uttered in a theatre. A play that begins with witchcraft.
Hold on, I think that there's a way when this is on that I should turn this off and this still works, so hold on. And chat, let me know if this doesn't work.
And ends with a bloody, severed head. A play filled with riddles, prophecies, nightmare visions, and lots of brutal murder. A play by William Shakespeare, sometimes referred to as the Scottish play, or the tragedy of Macbeth. First performed at the Globe Theatre in London in 1606, Macbeth is Shakespeare's shortest tragedy. It is also one of his most action-packed. In 5 acts, he recounts the story of a Scottish nobleman who steals the throne, presides over a reign of terror, and then meets a bloody end. Along the way, it asks important questions about ambition, power, and violence that spoke directly to the politics of Shakespeare's time and continue to echo in our own. England in the early 17th century was politically precarious. Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603 without producing an heir, and in a surprise move, her advisors passed the crown to James Stuart, King of Scotland. 2 years later, James was subject to an assassination attempt called the Gunpowder Plot. Questions of what made for a legitimate king were on everyone's lips. So Shakespeare must have known he had potent material when he conflated and adapted the stories of a murderous 11th century Scottish king named Macbeth and those of several other Scottish nobles. He found their annals in Holinshed's Chronicles, a popular 16th century history of Britain and Ireland. Shakespeare would also have known he needed to tell his story in a way that would immediately grab the attention of his diverse and rowdy audience. The Globe welcomed all sections of society, Wealthier patrons watched the stage from covered balconies, while poorer people paid a penny to take in the show from an open-air section called the Pit. Talking, jeering, and cheering was common during performances. There are even accounts of audiences throwing furniture when plays were flops. So Macbeth opens with a literal bang. Thunder cracks and 3 witches appear. They announce they're searching for a Scottish nobleman and war hero named Macbeth, then fly off while chanting a curse that predicts a world gone mad. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. A scene later, they find Macbeth and his fellow nobleman Banquo. All hail Macbeth, they prophesize. That shalt be king hereafter. King, Macbeth wonders. Just what would he have to do to gain the crown? Macbeth and his wife, Lady Macbeth, soon chart a course of murder, lies, and betrayal. In the ensuing bloodbath, Shakespeare provides viewers with some of the most memorable passages in English literature. Out, damn spot! Out, I say! Lady Macbeth cries when she believes she can't wipe her victim's blood off her hands. Her obsession with guilt is one of many themes that runs through the play, along with the universal tendency to abuse power, the endless cycles of violence and betrayal that define political conflict. As is typical with Shakespeare's language, a number of phrases that got their start in the play have been repeated so many times that they now feel commonplace. They include the milk of human kindness, what's done is done, and the famous witch's spell, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. But Shakespeare saves the juiciest bit of all for Macbeth himself. Towards the end of the play, Macbeth reflects on the universality of death and the futility of life. Out, out, brief candle, he laments. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Life may be a tale told by an idiot, but Macbeth is not. Shakespeare's language and characters have entered our cultural consciousness to a rare extent. Directors often use the story to shed light on abuses of power, ranging from the American mafia to dictators across the globe. The play has been adapted to film many times, including Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, which takes place in feudal Japan, and a modernized version called Scotland, PA, in which Macbeth and his rivals are managers of competing fast food restaurants. No matter the presentation, questions of morality, politics, and power are still relevant today. And so, it seems, is Shakespeare's Macbeth. Did you enjoy this?
I'm sorry, like the Scotland PA I've watched like a dozen times. I love that one so much. It's not appropriate to show in class, but I love that one. So when they mention it, I'm like, I love that movie. It's hilarious because it's all like these like serious Shakespearean conflicts of power, but they own a burger joint. So it's just, yeah. If I could show you guys some scenes, maybe we will near the end, but I love that one. All right, so that kind of gives you like an outline of what the story is about. So really quick refresher here. And again, chat is welcome, but I really like you guys in class to participate too. The characters in this play, what country are they from? Based on the video. Did you guys catch that? They have a strong accent. Yeah. They're Scotland, right? Scottish, right? The funny thing is this is actually written by Shakespeare. Shakespeare's what? Where's he from? English. He's English. He's from London, right? We're going to kind of go over a little bit about what they mentioned inside the play, inside the video, so you guys can get an understanding of why he wrote this play. A big thing that we're going to be looking at is conflict of power. And understanding what's going on around Shakespeare at the time helps you kind of understand why he would address this so aggressively in this play, right? Because he has so much drama going on in his own political realm. So, Shakespeare tragedy, we call it Macbeth. It is actually originally called the Tragedy of Macbeth, or as you saw, some just called it the Scottish play because it played in England, and there was a little bit of tension in between Scotland and England at the time. So it was written in 1606, we think, right? A lot of Shakespeare's timelines are a little jagged, which is when James I of Scotland becomes King of England. So Scotland and England are originally ruled by two different monarchs, right? When Elizabeth I, if you guys don't know her, she was a very, very strong, I love the Tudors, and she was one of the last Tudors, which is basically the family that had the crown at that time. Her father, if you guys have ever heard the story of Henry with the, how many wives did he have? 5? He beheaded his wives, he divorced his wives, he went through them like every 5 or 10 years. So her father, her sister was Bloody Mary, right? Her brother was like the child prince. So their family ruled very, very quickly because before her, everyone just seemed to die, right? Her brother took over after her father died, and her brother died at, I think, like age 12. Her sister took over, Bloody Mary. She had a horrible bloody reign. She tried to convert the whole country to Catholicism. In that way, she killed many, many people. When she dies and her sister takes over, Elizabeth, she is like a reign of peace. She lives a long, long time. She is a little violent. She converts the country who her sister tried so hard to convert to Catholicism. She converts it back to Christianity. But her lifespan is so long, her reign is so peaceful that she's really recognized as one of the strongest monarchs of English history, right? So everyone is very happy underneath her rule, but she rules on her own. Because of all the drama that her father and her sister had with providing an heir to the throne, she doesn't bother getting married. She doesn't bother having children. She doesn't care, right? She likes to rule in her own right. She knows if she gets married, she's going to have to share that power, and she doesn't like that. So when she dies, nobody's there to take over, right? There's no children. There's no husband. There's no nothing. So they have to look for someone that is blood connected to her to take over the throne. The only person that they can find is her nephew, James I. So James I is currently the King of Scotland. Okay, he's the son of her cousin. By the way, she beheaded her cousin. So she beheaded his mother. So it's a little hostile when he comes onto the throne. His mother was killed by the previous monarch. And then as he takes over, he is Catholic. So it's very, very obvious that the people are having trouble adapting to his rulership. They've been under a Christian monarch for so long. And back then, religion is very, very important. The entire country followed one religion, right? So this is a huge conflict to have a Catholic ruler come in and control a Christian country. And so there's actually, as mentioned in the video, a plot to kill him. The gunpowder plot of 1605, if you guys have ever heard of it. Basically, rebels put an entire fill an entire basement under Parliament with gunpowder bombs, right? And plan to blow it up during one of his meetings with Parliament. So it doesn't work. It's messed up because someone involved in it kind of releases the information. But that means that he knows the country hates him. He knows that people are against him. He knows that he can't probably live up to Elizabeth I, right? So there's a lot of conflict now that he's in charge. So Shakespeare is now working under James I, and there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of tension, right? If James I has absolute power in England, right, and you were seen as a favorite of the person that came before him, and he's trying to erase that person, right? He's trying to kind of take over smoothly. What do you think that you want to do with this new ruler? If you're Shakespeare, You got this new guy that's struggling to take power, and you were a favorite of the person before him. What do you want to do? For your own safety. What do you guys think? No guesses? Yeah. Gain trust. Get that person to like you. There's a new top dog in London, right? There's a new king. He has to get that person to like him. Why? Because Elizabeth I funded a lot of his plays. She made his money. And so now she's gone, and he has a new monarch that he has to make happy, right? So that's what he's gonna do. He's gonna kiss this guy's butt until he likes him, right? So what does he do to do this? He creates a play specifically for James I. That's what Macbeth is. This play was made to make James I happy. Right? All right, so James I is very intrigued with witchcraft, having written a book on it himself. So Shakespeare includes supernatural elements like witches. The play is going to open up with a really supernatural vibe. We have that boil, boil, toil, and trouble. I can't even think right now. We have that famous line. We have the witches. We have very supernatural, like dark forest scenes surrounding them. James loves this kind of stuff. He loves witchcraft, and so he concludes that in the play. He also focuses on the actual history of Scotland. He throws in a lot of fiction, but our main guy, our character, Macbeth, he was a real dude. He ruled from, he ruled for what, 50 years? Oh no, he lived for 50 years. He didn't rule for very long. He was a ruler who was he was a ruler who killed his king in the 11th century Scotland to gain the throne. Then he was killed, and the lineage that takes over connects to King James I. So I think the next one kind of explains this. In a current time, so in Shakespeare's time of assassination attempts and unhappy Christians, why would Shakespeare write a play about killing a king? Well, back in the day, and this isn't Shakespeare's time, I mean, this is Macbeth's time. In that time, you didn't get to be king just because you were someone's son. That's not how it worked. You had to earn it. You had to be a warrior. You had to win battles. You had to win people's support. You came in and you usually killed the king before you in order to gain that crown, right? And it kind of makes sense in a way, right? You want the king to be the strongest, most able person possible. So why would you trust that someone's son is just going to take over and do it right? No, back then, this person had to prove it, right? They had to come in and really kind of prove that they had power and leadership and people to support them. So at this time, in Macbeth's time, that's how things go. And the story basically kind of villainizes Macbeth. And then at the very, very end, a new line takes over after Macbeth. And that line is actually James I's like descendants. It actually leads to James I. That's when we start the whole blood inherit the crown thing. And that's why James is going to love this, right? Because it's going to honor his descendants, his ancestors. So now, though, in this time, the crown is all about blood and divine right to the throne. You get the throne because God chose you. You were born to your parents, the king and the queen. So Shakespeare focuses on the downfall of Macbeth, committing the ultimate sin of killing a monarch. So even though the play focuses on killing the king, taking power from him, which is exactly what James is worried about, it villainizes that character, right? It makes him the bad guy. I don't think so. I still love Macbeth, but it makes him the villain. So Shakespeare's plays had no fantastic settings or special effects. So as we're reading this, you guys have to understand and you guys saw a little bit in the video, if you guys were going and watching this, and it was meant to be watched. This is read, we're gonna listen to it, but it's meant to be watched. There were no fantastic sceneries like you guys see today, if you guys go to plays. There was no special effects. A lot of the time, you have actors describing things that are happening off stage or describing things that have already happened in great detail. Why? Because they can't show it to you, right? They can't create a battle scene that's like Game of Thrones worthy. They have to kind of have to describe it to you and explain it to you in their language. And that's why his language is so important. And that's why sometimes, like Mrs. Plenge, they're long-winded speeches because they're trying to give you all the information of what's happening off stage. As we read, these are important for you guys to learn. We'll be using Roman numerals. So if you guys don't understand these yet, there's 1 through 10. That should be enough for you guys to function throughout the play. You're coming in following, at the very, very beginning of this play, you're coming in following events of a great rebellion that has been squashed by Macbeth and Banquo's army. So those are going to be the 2 characters that we're kind of coming in and seeing first off in this play. So we're right away in this play, we're coming in after a huge battle, right? These guys have squashed someone that's trying to take over their king, trying to take the crown from their king. And so they're these great warriors that have just kind of won this huge battle. Their king at this time, King Duncan, is the one that we're going to, that's going to be in charge as the play opens. So as you guys come into the first scene, we'll see and we'll analyze this, but there's going to be a ton of description of the battle that just happened. So the first one that opens up after the witch's introduction, you guys are going to see a ton of description on the battle, and we'll kind of see what I mean when I say that a lot of the stuff that happens off stage and it's described in the language. So let's take a look at some methods that I'm going to need you guys to keep in mind as we read. And then we're going to actually take a look at one of the opening scenes for Macbeth, so you guys can hear the language and you guys can kind of see a little bit what it would look like on stage. So reading Macbeth is difficult. There's going to be recordings for everything. If I'm not here, you guys are going to be able to see or hear a recording that's available to you guys. So always hearing Shakespeare is how you understand it. If you just read it in your mind, it doesn't really do anything. You have to hear it or read it out loud. So this is going to be, I think these are all valid tips on reading Shakespeare. You won't read a lot of it alone, but if you're absent or you go back and visit some of it, these are going to be tips to kind of help you better understand how to read it.
How to read Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was a master of the English language, and his words have withstood the test of time. He was an English poet, playwright, and actor. Today, he is regarded as one of the greatest playwrights of all time. The themes of his plays and the words he wove have captured the emotions of audiences from the late 1500s to present day. Since the English language has changed so much over time, it can often be daunting to read Shakespeare's writing today. However, with a few helpful tips, not only can you decipher the words of Shakespeare, but you can also understand why he is such a highly regarded writer. You must remember that Shakespeare wrote his plays to be performed, not to be read. It may be helpful to read the words aloud or imagine them being performed on stage. This keeps the words in context and in their proper place as lines in a play rather than words in a book. Consider this passage from Antony and Cleopatra. O Carmion, where thinkest thou he is now? Stands he or sits he? Or does he walk? Or is he on his horse? O happy horse to bear the weight of Antony! Do bravely, horse, for what's thou whom thou movest? The demi-atlas of this earth, the arm and burgonet of men. He's speaking now, or murmuring. Where's my serpent of old Nile? For so he calls me. Because the syntax of English was different during the 16th century, reading the words on a page may get in the way of understanding their meaning. Reading the passage aloud may make it much easier to understand. You may surprise yourself with how well you can deduce the meaning of a word from other words or clues in Shakespeare's writing. Referencing these context clues should be your first step when determining the meaning of a word or statement. As an example, imagine you don't understand the meaning of this line, Do bravely, horse, for what's thou whom thou movest? Examining the lines surrounding this one will help you to understand its meaning. O happy horse, to bear the weight of Antony! Do bravely, horse, for what's thou whom thou movest, the demi-atlas of this earth. The horse is clearly carrying Antony, an important person. Cleopatra is asking the horse if it knows just how important Antony is. By using context clues, you can untangle many of Shakespeare's words. The English language was very different during the late 1500s and early 1600s. As a result, you are bound to encounter words you have never seen. You may not always be able to deduce their meanings. Fortunately, there are many glossaries for reading Shakespeare. These glossaries can be found in a library or online. It is easy to look up words you don't know, and it's always beneficial to add them to your own vocabulary. As an example, imagine you don't know the meaning of the word burgonet in the line, "The demi-atlas of this earth, the arm and burgonet of men." You can simply look the word up and find out that it's a type of helmet that has a visor. As such, the line means that Antony protects and defends a large portion of the people. There are some common words in Elizabethan English, the English of Shakespeare's time, that you should familiarise yourself with, such as anon, meaning soon, thou, thee and ye, meaning you, thine or thy, meaning your, ere, meaning before, high, meaning hurry, and wast, meaning were. Much of Shakespeare's lasting greatness stems from his ability to reach a broad audience, often touching the hearts of those across social and economic boundaries with only a few words. His plays capture themes of real life and universal emotions that permeate human nature, allowing audiences across time to relate to the words of a man who died hundreds of years ago. For the purpose of entertainment, Shakespeare included fights, jokes, intrigue, and suspense in his plays. If you lose yourself in his words, you will come to love the works of Shakespeare.
Okay, so I get this a lot as an English teacher. When you guys are reading stuff, a lot of the time people will just stop me, like I'm a walking dictionary, and ask me what a word means instead of looking it up. It's very difficult to understand that it's hard to understand all the words that have ever existed in English, right? And then words have changed their meanings throughout history. That just makes sense. You guys alone, your generation has come up with a ton of new terms that have had to be introduced to Webster, right? So you're going to see a lot of vocab words that you guys have never seen before, a lot of methods of speaking that you guys are not familiar with. Totally normal. People have not always spoken the way you guys speak now, right? So it's going to be a learning curve. You're going to slowly get used to the language. You're going to recognize the common words that he kind of mentioned there. But then a big thing for this, and I'll try to encourage you guys and do it with you as we read, is look words up, right? If you don't understand what it is, look words up. But then again, the version that I have for you guys is going to help you with that and kind of normalize the language for you. But I highly encourage you guys practice with the original version as well, because you can get used to it that way. Okay. So having done that and understanding the language is different, understanding there's usually very little to nothing on the scene as far as scenery and decoration and background goes. It's just people and their language. And remember, the scene that we're going to watch is obviously in front of people of today that know what they're looking at and are calm and well behaved. If you imagine this in Shakespeare's time, as you guys saw in the video, a lot of the people that were in the very front of the audience was almost like, you guys know what a mosh pit is? It's almost like mosh pit worthy, right? You have a lot of people who are drunk, who are yelling, who are screaming, who are not paying attention. It's difficult to get their attention. So these actors had to perform in really kind of in heavy circumstances like that. So this is very calm, but I kind of want you to try to envision this scene happening in its original Shakespearean atmosphere. So this is going to be one of the opening scenes. We're going to have Macbeth and Banquo. Remember, we just talked about them. They are just coming in from a huge battle where they have squashed a rebellion, and they run into the three witches. They run into these three weird looking women in the forest on their way home. And so this is going to be their reaction with these women.
What are these? So withered and so wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on it. Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me, by each at once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so.
Speak, if you can. What are you?
Oh, hail, Macbeth! Hail to thee, Thane of Glans!
All hail Macbeth! Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor!
All hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter!
Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair? In the name of truth, are ye fantastical, or that indeed which outwardly ye show? My noble partner you greet with present grace and great prediction of noble having and of royal hope that he seems rapt withal. To me, you speak not. If you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me, who neither beg nor fear your favours nor your hate.
Hail!
Hail, hail!
Lesser than Macbeth, and greater.
Not so happy, yet much happier.
Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So all hail Macbeth and Banquo.
Banquo and Macbeth, all hail.
Okay. So not looking at the meaning of that scene, right? Not trying to analyze the language too much. I want you guys to think about Banquo there. Banquo is the one that had blood on his face, right? And he's talking to the witches. What did you guys notice about how he behaved on stage? What did that add to the scene? You guys can imagine, you guys will have to just read this or listen to it. You can't see anything, right? You can't see the actors, but just being able to watch Banquo there, the actor, what does he add to that dialogue for you guys? It helps you understand it. Samuel? Gestures are a huge help, right? Definitely. He has, when he talks about predicting the future, and he does the seeds of time, right? You can predict which ones will grow and which ones won't. Why don't you predict my future, right? If that's the truth. That helps us understand just those gestures. What else did he do that was helpful? As an actor, think about his method as an actor. Yes. His tone of voice. Go ahead, and if you want to add to that, go ahead. Sorry. No, just his tone of voice. He's sarcastic. He's mocking, right? He adds a little bit of fun to it. That laugh, it's not in the lines. You're not going to read that when you see it. The actor adds that in, right? When he hears the prediction that kind of scares Macbeth, he laughs out loud, he jokes, and he kind of taunts them with, well, now predict me. If you have such great things for him, predict my wonderful future, right? He adds the sense of personality, and the actors are always going to give that to the play. So we'll try to watch a few scenes as we go through, but really a lot of this is going to be focusing on trying to imagine these scenes being played out, not just reading them on a page, right? And that's why we're going to be listening to them. But they're really entertaining. We just have to kind of use our imagination a little bit. All right, so I'm going to briefly go through these, but you guys are going to revisit them in the review that you guys are doing. The characters that we're going to have as we enter into this play, we're going to, of course, have Lord Macbeth. Almost everybody that you see in this play are going to be noblemen. Noblemen, they're going to have land, they're going to have property, and they're going to have kind of say and influence with the king, but they're not actually kings themselves, right? They're given these roles as kind of an honor and a privilege from the king. So they have to answer to the king at all times, but they do have a level of power over the common folk, right? So we have Lord Macbeth, who is a nobleman, and eventually you guys will see his title grow throughout throughout the play. And when they give him new titles, they'll refer to him by that title. So for example, he starts out as Thane of Glamis and then Thane of Cawdor. So sometimes you'll see people refer to him as Cawdor. That's just referring to him by his title. So if you see that, they're still addressing Macbeth. They're just going to use his official title. So the big prediction at the very beginning of this play, and it'll lead us through all the events that go on, is very, very beginning, he's predicted by these witches to become king, right? And as we stated, to become king, you didn't just inherit that, right? You were supposed to earn it. And so if he's serving the current king, this prediction of he will become king is a little nerve-wracking, right? It's conflicting with what's currently going on. Basically, you're going to be taking over the title of the guy you currently support. We have Lady Macbeth. Anytime you see a lady in that same name, it means it's his wife. She urges his ambition. She urges that he will become king by becoming violent, right? Possibly taking over and killing the king. Lady Macbeth is not like any other woman that kind of you've seen in the literature so far. She is vicious. She is manipulating. She is heartless. And honestly, that is unseen at the time in women in literature. And so she's kind of painted a little bit as a villain, but I do like to see her, and we'll look at her and analyze her in different ways, because I think that that's simplifying her role in the play. In the play, they don't have any children. So they've never had any children. So in the play, you won't see any descendants. Banquo, you guys have saw in the opening, he's the only witness to the witch's prophecy. He's the only one there on stage when they predict that he will be king. The prediction, and we'll look at that when we analyze the first act, the prediction that you saw was that he will not be king, but his descendants will be king. Again, a conflicting idea, right? If his descendants will be king, that means Macbeth's descendants wouldn't be king. There's a whole conflict with what the witches predict. Banquo does have a son, Fleance, and we will see him numerous times in the play. Some other names that you're going to have to remember: King Duncan, he is the King of Scotland. Malcolm is his son, the next in line to the throne. Donalbain we barely ever see, but he is, again, Duncan's son. So you're kind of already seeing the conflict, right? Duncan has two successors that can be able to take over. He also has a brother, Siward. So he has a lot of people that can take his place if something happens to him. So this prediction of Macbeth becoming king is really already has a lot of conflicts when it happens. Everyone's a nobleman. You'll see these other names in the play. Macduff particularly is going to be very important, but Lennox, Menteith, Ross, Agnes, Katniss, all of these are going to be in the play. And then you guys will have this posted. You guys will have an online version and a YouTube audiobook, which we will use. It's actually a really good audiobook. Aside from a couple misses, it's generally really good. If you guys are at home, don't have your copy or stressed, this is actually really cool. This is the online copy. The only reason I say that you want this one is the translations for these have to be paid for at a certain point. So you'll start out with some translations for the text, but eventually what'll happen as you go through is they'll start blurring them out. So you really want to make sure that you pick up your copy. And I should have your copy in class for those of you that are here, but online you really want to make sure that you don't have to rely on the online, because the line by line translations eventually blur out when you don't pay for it. All right, so I'm done boring you guys for today. But I do want you guys to make sure that you've understood what is happening in this presentation. So what we're going to do is in a few minutes, I'm going to post a review worksheet to your classwork page. In the review worksheet, I'm going to have you fill out some questions in your own words based on the presentation, and I'm going to also share the presentation with you in that assignment, right? So you can go back, review the videos, or anything that you kind of need to refresh. If you do not finish it in class today, it'll be your assignment to finish before our next class. So if you don't finish it today, the time that you would normally have for first period Thursday, just use it to finish it then. It's very, very short, very brief. The only thing that really I think will take personal reflection is the final question I ask you guys about fate and your opinions on that, and that'll lead us into the first act, starting that next week. So let me go ahead and stop presenting, stop sharing, online hold tight. I am going to post that assignment right now, hold on. Right, okay. Oh. They need that copy. Okay. So let's present again. It's thinking. All right. So unit 4, synthesis, you guys are going to go in and open that up, and you guys will have the introduction review. So that'll be a copy for each of you guys. You can just go in and fill that out. Please note that all of the questions that are based on the slideshow ask you to explain in your own words. The whole thing is, I don't want you guys copying directly over from the slideshow. One, because the slideshow has a bunch of notes, and it really shouldn't be that long for you guys. Two, when you explain things in your own words, it means that you understand it, like you're able to express it with your own thoughts rather than mine. So it shows me that you kind of understand what was presented in the presentation. And so you guys are going to go ahead and fill those out. Make sure that you go down to the characters. There's a character section. And then finally, my reflection question for Act 1 is going to be at the very bottom. There. And then the very bottom reflection question. For these, you guys don't need to write in different fonts or different letters, colors. You're welcome to, but it's optional because I am using the graphs now, so it's easy for me to decipher your guys' responses from the question. Okay, so that's what you guys are going to be working on. And again, the presentation is there if you need to visit it. Before I release you guys to work, I do have one thing to say for this class in particular, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording now. If I can.